Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm David. Today's video was going to be all about the T&D diorama. You can see I've got it set up here at work, and you can actually see a few teasers in here, and I'll go through that later on. I decided that when I was editing the video, I really didn't like it, to be honest. I've got footage of all of this being built, everything being glued together, the track being laid, painted, wired up, all of that sort of stuff. But the way it's coming out in the edit, I just really didn't like it. So I might be able to edit some of that together. But I think what will happen is in the future, I'll just do a summary video on the progress I've made so far, the diorama itself, and all the details in it. For now, you can see though, it's in a box, it's lit. We've got some nice painted back scenes in there. The retaining wall going around the back, currently working on that. And you can see the backman shed in here, and it's got some interior detail and everything like that. But what you're all here for probably is going to be the Viaduct diorama. So yeah, I visited my parents for a week. This was weeks ago now. I've been trying to edit this video as well, but I've just not had the time really. But I've got time today, so hopefully I'll get it uploaded this evening. But yeah, so I visited my parents for a week, got all the plywood delivered, got all the foam delivered, and decided to build the Viaduct. So we'll see what progress I made. It's going to be chops and changes between footage that I filmed on my phone at the time, obviously with no microphone, and then some voiceover stuff with some photographs as well. But for now, if we just look at this T&D diorama, you can see my new Merg controller is working. And hopefully if I've got this right, you should be able to see the little teaser there. Brand new Helgen high neck, weathered from the weathering works, and I've just fitted some new lights and sound inside as well. There will be a video hopefully in the future, I keep saying this, it's probably in a few weeks time, on the new rolling stock. You can see I've got a nice shark ballast brake van there, along with the high neck, and there's a few other things that I've added to the collection. That'll be in a future video. Right, let's go on to the Viaduct and how I designed, built and did the scenery on it as well. Okay, so the planning for the Viaduct started, in all places, on holiday in Cyprus with my girlfriend. So obviously a lot of time lazing about by the pool, for sunbathing, and I came up with the idea of starting the first module for the future layout. Now, one of the great things about building a modular layout is I can build one module at a time over the next couple of years, and hopefully it'll all slot together. Now, if you remember the previous version of Colasdale, one of my favourite scenes was the Viaduct scene, and I got some really good response from both relatives and friends, as well as people out on the internet as well, looking at that scene. So I thought I'd start by recreating that for the future layout as well. I planned it to be a 4 foot by 18 inches section, and I thought this would be a great start to the future layout, as it's small enough to store in my parents' loft, but also large enough I can take some photos of some nice trains crossing the bridge. When I combine this with the next module, which I'm still designing currently, this will make an 8 foot by 18 inches section. Again, small enough to be stored in my parents' loft, but I can also bring it down and then photograph full rake trains when I want to. So looking at the Viaduct scene itself, obviously on my previous version I had built the Viaduct myself out of foam and plasticard, but I wasn't overly happy with that. I've seen some really good results on YouTube, particularly from Charlie at Chadwick Model Railway, also from the team at the Hornby magazine, using the Wills Viaduct kit. So I took the dimensions of a couple of Wills Viaduct kits stuck together, put that into some 3D CAD. I also then designed a baseboard around it using a mix of 9mm and 12mm plywood, similar to the construction of West Canal sidings, and I designed a 3D model. I then took this and I ordered all of the correct plywood, foam, screws, wood glue, all that sort of stuff to be delivered to my parents' house, as I happened to be visiting them the week after I got back from holiday. As I've explained in a previous video, this was a perfect storm where a lot of my plans with my parents and my partner had to be cancelled, which meant I was going to be spending a lot of time sat around their bungalow. I thought, why not build the first module of the railway? So anyway, this is the final design I came up with on my laptop in 3D CAD. And here we have it in real life. Okay guys, so this is the plywood for this first module. We've got a big sheet of 12mm ply, that's 6x2. We've got two 4x2 sheets of 5.5mm ply. And it's time to cut those up. I've just got the sawhorse out, I've got a GoPro here so I can film some bits. And there is my saw and my sander. So yeah, let's see how this goes. Okay, so after pretty much a full day of cutting, see we've got all the parts there, 2 big sheets here, the spare sheet there, that needs to be cut to size once I know where it fits, and we've got a sheet down there, same deal, that needs to be cut to size once the foam's in. Tidied absolutely everything up with some 80 grit sandpaper, just tidied up the edges quickly. Once it's together it will have another sand as well, but I just had to go inside. Well, get ready to go inside because it's threatening rain. But yeah, it's looking good so far. Okay, so as I said, the design of this baseboard is very similar to that of West Canal sidings, in that I've used plywood cut down into strips to form the frame, and then I've used plywood on the top to form the base. And the only difference here being that I've used 12mm ply to form the framework, and then 6mm ply to make the top. I'm going to up this in the future on other modules, so I think 18mm ply and 9mm ply. This module itself is actually built to be nice and lightweight because there's a lot of plywood going in to form the structure around the lower section where the viaduct will be. Obviously in the future modules, most of them will just be relatively thin and flat, so I can get away with 18mm ply and 9mm ply. So having cut out all those sheets, I then cut out some special pieces for the end. You can see here I've fit the contour of the landscape as well as a little notch in there to hold the track bed. I then assembled this all by gluing and screwing, and also using a pin gun that I borrowed from my uncle, who used to be a carpenter. So let's see the finished product. Okay, so I've basically done everything that I'd done in my computer plan. So we've got all of the woodwork done, the bridge is glued together, still needs lots of work, filling, sanding, painting, all that sort of stuff. However, it's basically complete. So you can see, we'll start with the bridge, how it attaches. It just sits on these plinths and it's got a bit of 5mm ply either side. And that means it can just be lifted out for the time being. And then looking at the board itself, we've got a 12mm subframe underneath, 5.5mm ply top, and then we've got 12mm on top making the formers. So we've got a former for the hillside here, former for the hillside there, same on the other end, and then here we've got 12mm riser and 5mm top for the track, again same on the other end. Coming around to the sides then, each end has got a 12mm section which for one holds this down onto the sub base, makes it nice and rigid, but also this is where the next baseboard will rest on here. Obviously the viaduct board is going to be the lowest board there is, so the next baseboard actually rests on here and will come up to about this high, and then the track will still be above the level of the baseboard. Coming around to the back then, we've got 5.5mm back seam. This just slots in and out. I would take it out and show you, but it's an absolute bugger to get in because it's in a really tight groove down here, tight channel. But I assure you this slides in and out, and it's got a slot on each end it rests in, and that's so it fits through the loft hatch because it wouldn't fit through with this board on. Then on the back here you can see the framework. This is where the incline is going to go. This is just a bit of flat 5mm, 5.5mm on 12mm risers, but obviously the Woodland Scenic foam incline is going to be coming out the back here. If I tilt this up, you can see, without dropping it into the pond, we've just got your standard box baseboard frame. You've got 2 holes at either end. This will enable me to reach up through the scenery to these bits of ply. So this is where the track feeders are going to come through at each end, and I'll be able to reach up through the bottom. So yeah, all in all, I'm very, very happy with this. It's now time to start getting the foam installed. Okay, so it's a lot of trial and error. I'm making a heck of a lot of mess, but I've got this cheap hot wire foam cutter from Amazon. I've decided to start with this side as a sort of trial. Not sure how it's going so far, not sure if I like it. I might have to start again, but I've got plenty of foam spare if I need to. The next step though, I think, is going to be to glue this down so nothing shifts as I'm starting to try and cut it. I'm going to also glue some extra bits on the top here to build it up to the track height. But what I'm going to be using is this Everbuild Stick 2 Instant Spray Contact Adhesive. It does say on the list of things it will glue foam. And I did give it a test yesterday. I just glued 2 bits of spare foam together, weighed them down, and they were practically inseparable. So it does work very, very well. I think I got this on Amazon. I've had it for ages, just in a toolbox. But yeah, so basically all I'm going to do is take each piece of foam off, glue underneath it, glue the foam, put it down. You'll see what I mean. Contact adhesive, it's good to put glue on both surfaces and then weigh them down together. And then they should stick. Okay, you can see I've got that one hillside done. See, it's generally sloping down this way, but it sort of builds up in a mound towards where the bridge goes. If I just slot the viaduct back in, you can see generally how that fits. So we're going to have the river curving off around here. Should look quite nice. Obviously, there's a lot to be done with sculptor mould. I'm going to be covering this in sculptor mould and sort of blending it all in. There's lots of areas to fill. Gap down there. But generally, try to do it all the shaping work with the foam. Yeah, it's come out quite good. You can see I've just sculpted the foam to fit the wood formers here. Ended up chopping off a little bit of the wood here to make it a match, but yeah, I'm very happy with that. Now it's time to turn my attention to this side over here, which is going to take a lot longer. Probably going to do this off camera because I imagine it's going to be quite frustrating. So I'm not sure how many photos and things I'm going to take. But yeah, we'll see how this goes. Okay, and now it's time to paint the viaduct. Fortunately, I am staying with my parents this week, hence the space and the tools and stuff that I don't normally have where I'm currently staying at work. But yeah, so my dad is into his airfits kits, and he has all of these Vallejo paints and a really nice Badger airbrush, as I've used in some previous videos. So that's what I'm going to be using today to paint this. Of course, you can paint it by hand, just with brushes and stuff, but I prefer to use the airbrush. To that end, I've done some masking. Ended up masking off all of the brickwork. You can see I started at this end very roughly, but then I soon worked out it's easier to do sort of these vertical stripes or sort of, well, crossways across the bridge, sorry, and then just come along with a scalpel and go along the edge of the stone. The reason I've done that is because I'm going to be spraying all of this stonework, starting with a primer and then various coats of different paints. Get it in the light so you can see it. Various coats of different paints, and I don't want to get any of the brickwork covered in paint. You can see as well I've done some filling and sanding in various places, just where there was some little obvious gaps. I've used Milliput for this. It's a really good modelling filler. It's basically a sort of two-part epoxy resin in a clay form, and yeah, it works really well. So what I'm going to be doing first is covering it in a Vallejo surface primer. This is just one I had handy that I've used in the past. Hopefully I've got enough there to give it a bit of coverage, and then we'll start trying to put some different coats of paint on. Okay, so I've got it primed. The astute amongst you might have noticed it's a completely different colour, and that's because I just could not get that primer to flow through the airbrush. So I took it outside and I've got a can of grey primer, just basic grey primer, and that's covered it well. I just wanted to get a nice primer coat on because paint and plastic can be hard to get right. So now I've primed it grey. It's time to repaint it in pretty much the same colour the plastic was originally. I've got sand yellow from Vallejo Model Air, and then just some white and maybe a few drops of yellow. I'm just trying to make a sandstony colour, and I'll let you know how that goes in a minute. Okay, so I brought it outside. I ended up deciding that this sand yellow is actually a really good base colour, without any additional white or yellow, as I was saying before. So I just sprayed the whole thing in the sand yellow, and I think it's come out quite good. It's a nice sort of golden brown sort of sandstony colour. The next job then is going to be to pick out individual stones in various colours. So I think I'm going to use some sort of whites, browns, greys, blacks, those sorts of things, and just try and pick out lots of random stones. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so this has taken hours, but I've put on 4 different colours. It's that desert sand primer, 2 different browns, and a black, just all over. I've realised it kind of looks like I've tried to paint the viaduct in Berlin camo, the urban camo for tanks. But anyway, what I'm going to do now is probably mist over some lighter brown in some areas, and then it's going to be time to start adding some black washes, and hopefully it will all merge together. Okay, so it's received a coat, a very light coat of Vallejo Dark Earth. This just ties things together. You can see I've done some patchy stripe work and things. Just add some blotchiness to the stones. Now it's time for the washes. So some black acrylic wash, literally just black paint, acrylic thinners, sort of to the consistency of milk, all over. And this is the result. I am so happy with that. I'll leave this to dry for a bit, and then I'm in two minds whether I keep adding more detail to the stonework or I peel off the masking tape on the brickwork, start work on the brickwork. Okay, so I've decided to go for the brickwork. As you can see, I've peeled off the masking tape. A little bit of bleeding under some of the edges, but that's really no major drama, as all of this is going to be really heavily weathered. Looking at the photos of Viaducts, pretty much all the brickwork is just covered in sort of lime and salt washes and all that sort of stuff coming out of the bricks. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to put in the mortar between the actual runs of bricks themselves. Should look something like this. You can see where I've put the model filler on the other day. You can see where that's coming between the bricks. So I'm just going to be using some white acrylic paint, probably this Vallejo Air, as it's a little bit thinner, so it should run between the bricks. I'm going to be painting it on and then rubbing it off with a tissue and some thinners. Probably won't film this or photograph it, because my least favourite thing is putting mortar between bricks. Okay, so it's the next day and I've brought the bridge outside just so I can see the colours better. And it's time to do some final washes, and then I will be gluing the bridge in place. Contrary to some people's opinions, I think it's going to be easier to just have the bridge glued in place to begin with before I bed it all in with sculptor mould. So, what we're going to be using today is a whitewash, which is just some white air paint mixed with a little bit of thinner. A black Humbrol enamel wash, just because it runs slightly different to the acrylic wash. I think it looks quite effective. And then we've got an arrow brush, a wide brush, some thinners, and some tissue in case I want to do some dry brushing. But we're basically just going to be adding lots of streaking down the pillars and down the front of the bridge to make it look like it's been weathered and it's got salt and lime and stuff coming out the stone. This bridge is probably going to be, 100 years old in the era my layout's set, maybe slightly less, but it's still going to have lots and lots of weathering. Okay, so it's quite a big difference. I've put lots of the white and black runs down the side, just to show where all of this weathering is. Part of me is a little disappointed I've got rid of some of the stonework, but also, if you look at any of the photographs of real viaducts, they were covered in sort of the white runs of salt and crystals and that sort of thing. Could come back in the future and maybe tone it back a tiny bit. Might give it a quick spray of the sort of base colour, line it up a bit, but I'm not too sure. I might give it a test and see how it looks. But what I'm also going to do before I do that is add some green, Tamiya dark green, down near where it's going to be touching the river, where we get some sort of algae growth. Okay, so I've got the viaduct finished and painted. It's been glued in with a hot glue gun, so that is nice and solidly in there now. It's also going to be bedded in further when I add the sculptor mould. But for now it's time to lay the track on top, I think. Might as well now, before I do anything else. Still waiting for the sculptor mould and those sorts of things to come in the post. So I'm going to lay the track, and I'm probably going to end up putting some masking tape over it to protect it. But, okay, so the first thing to do then is to lay the cork. This is, I believe, 3mm cork. I'll put the dimensions on the screen. I've just cut it to strips. The way I like to do this is to do it the width of a metal ruler, because that just so happens to be the perfect width, I find, to lay the track. So I've just cut down a big roll of cork into lots of these strips, just as wide as my metal ruler there. And you can see I've come along and I've drawn some guidelines onto the baseboard and onto the bridge. The way I've done this is the tracks from this end across to here are perfectly straight. So I worked out my spacing between the two tracks from the sleeper edge to sleeper edge, and I've just drawn that in, and that'll be where the cork goes. Over here you can see we've got a slight curve, ever so slight, in the track, but this is key to make it fit with the next module along. So I've decided to put that in. The way I've done that, this is where the end of the bridge is on my plan. On my plan I didn't know how long this viaduct was going to be, so you can see the grey is the end of the straight track, where it starts to curve. So I've printed this out, and you can see I've marked the outer edges of the sleepers here. So I'm going to start by following the outer edge of the cork, then swap to the inner edge, all the way along here, and I'm just going to be gluing it on with a little bit of No More Nails. I might also use some wood glue. We'll see how well the No More Nail goes. And I'm just going to glue the cork down and weigh it down. Okay, so the cork's all glued down. There's a small army of Tango cans because that's what I used to weigh it all down. I'm just about to glue the track down. For anyone who's not worked with Bullhead Rail by Pico before, it is an absolute nightmare. It's well worth it. But those are the rail joiners there. They're tiny. You can get away with bigger ones, but I've decided to use the realistic ones. Sometimes it can be better to put the droppers on first, but I think I'm going to glue it down first because I'm trying to get a nice straight run, and I find if you put the droppers in before you glue it down, you're then stuck with sort of gluing the track around where your droppers are, whereas if you glue the track down, it's all set solid, then you can put the droppers on at the end. If you've noticed, I've cut off a couple sleeps at the end. This is where the copper clad sleeps are going to go. At the moment I don't have any, so I'm just going to leave the ends blank and be very wary of moving this, watching those ends. But I might get some before the end of the week, I might not. That might be a project for the future. But yeah, I'm going to glue the track down. Ended up using weatherproof wood adhesive to glue the cork down, and that's what I used to glue the track down. Just smear it on over the cork and then weigh it all down. I'll probably use these cans again. Okay, so it is the following day now. I got all the track glued down, just with the wood glue, as I said. I then masked it all up, and I sprayed it with a can of Rail Match. It's not sleeper grime, so there's none in stock. I think it's frame dirt or something. It's just a similar sort of blacky brown colour, just to weather it all up. I've put some wiring in, only 702 wire, because that's all I could get at the local model shop. I'd normally use 1602 for droppers, but 702 will be fine for now. I can always change it at a later date if I really want to. And yeah, give it a quick test run with the 08. This is the one that I sound fitted and weathered up a few weeks ago. She's looking really good. Unfortunately, I don't have a track rubber here, so there's one coming with Amazon Prime today, so I should be able to clean the rail heads off and actually get it running properly. But for now, it's not running very well at all, as there's still a lot of paint left on the rails. But no, really happy with the progress so far. I've literally just received a delivery though, which I've been waiting for 2 days now, from Geek Gaming Scenic. Now, if you've not seen Geek Gaming before, he's into his sort of wargamey stuff, Warhammer, that type of thing. But I've got some scenery supplies. I've got Forest Path, so this is a mixture of sort of soil and gravel and stuff. I don't normally buy this sort of scatter. I'd normally get it straight from the garden. But I thought just for ease and to try some new products, I'd buy some of this. Then I got some City Rubble. So this is just, again, some nice gravels and things. Hopefully that'll be useful for this nice footpath here, and maybe for some scatterings in the riverbed. Then what I'm looking forward to using is this bark here. I actually saw a video from Marklin of Sweden. He used some bark to make some very convincing rock faces. So I'm going to give that a go on some of the steeper bits of the hillside and perhaps towards the riverbed. And then finally, the main event. This is what I'm going to use to do the hillside modelling compound. Now, this is a replacement for Sculptamold. Basically, because I couldn't get hold of any Sculptamold this week. I did try and order it from an art supply company, but they emailed me and said it wasn't in stock. So then I made a change of order to this modelling compound from Geek Gaming Scenics, as it's supposedly very, very similar to Sculptamold. Very similar properties. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some Sculptamold. I'm going to start spreading it over the hillside, and then I'm going to place some of these bits of cork in as rock features in a couple of areas and see if I can blend those in. And then once it's all dried, we can start painting and start putting the scenery in properly. Okay, so it's several hours later, and the plastering is all done. See, I glued in some of these bark pieces to make the rock faces in different areas. Annoyingly, so that Geek Gaming stuff, whatever it was that I bought, only lasted from here until here. So literally just this top section and a strip down there came from that Geek Gaming Scenic stuff. And then at that point, I got a few choice words were said, because I just waited about 3 days for this delivery to come from DHL. And then I realised all there was for it really was to make some myself. So I followed a guide I found on YouTube, and I mixed, should be plaster of Paris, but I actually used general purpose filler because it's basically the same. Don't hold me to that in the comments section, but it's very similar in its properties. So I used a little bit of polyfiller type stuff, wood glue, and kitchen towel blended together in a food blender, and it created my own version of sculptor mould, which has come out looking relatively good, I'd say. We'll see how it dries. Obviously, if it all goes horrendously wrong, I can start again. But touch wood, for now, it's looking pretty good. This Geek Gaming stuff is very good. It's dried very, very quickly to be very, very hard. Some of the stuff I've made is still quite soft, as it's still dry and it's still quite wet. But yeah, I think it's turned out okay. I made sure all the while to keep wiping off any excess from the stonework. There might be a few bits and bobs here and there that need touching up, but I think overall I managed to avoid getting any sculptor mould on there. But yeah, and this blue stuff you can see behind here, I've not painted the sky a ghastly shade of blue. That's actually a sheet of plastic. It's actually used for waterproofing bathrooms and that sort of thing. My uncle gave it to me because it would allow me to plaster up to the plastic, and then hopefully when this dries I'll be able to slide the plastic out, and the back scene, which is still behind there, should be completely untouched and perfectly clean. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I've got in the post some DCC Concept sleepers, so I'm going to put them in at either end here on both tracks, and that will just hold those end sleepers in position, ensuring there's no movement on this modular layout. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ballast the track using wooden Scenics, fine ballast. I'm not going to bother filming that. Everyone's got a different version of ballast video out there on YouTube. I think I've done one before, so I'm not going to film that. I'll just come back when I've done it later and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so it's the next day. There's a coat of brown paint over all the plaster. The track is ballasted and glued, ready to go. And I've been painting these rock faces. Still a lot more work to go on those rock faces, but they are getting there. What I'm going to do now is just weather up the track. All I'm going to use is some Rail Match frame dirt. I would normally use sleeper grime, but I can't get hold of it at the moment. So a bit of frame dirt along with the track. Might add some blacks and greys maybe, but mostly frame dirt. Okay, so we've reached the final day of me visiting my parents. This is just one day's work getting all the scenery done, and unfortunately I stopped taking videos and started taking photos to save time. So yeah, I was in a mad rush on this last day just to get some scenery done, to take some photos, and to have this board in some sort of scenic ready state. Obviously it's by no means done, and this was just a little bit of a rush job, but I think it actually came out quite well, all things considered. So what I'm going to do is do a little bit of a music montage and talk you through some of the techniques I've used. These will be covered in a lot more detail when I do videos on the rest of the layout. Remember, this is just a 4-foot section of what is going to be, hopefully, a 17 feet by 12 feet layout in a few years' time. Okay, so as I said, I came along with the airbrush and used some black and some frame dirt just to weather the track. And also, you can see I put a little bit of paint down in the riverbed there. And here's a closer look at the track, and it's looking quite nice, remembering some black stains where there's oil spills on the ballast. Looking closer at those rock faces then, came along, did a lot of dry brushing with some greys, some browns, different tones. I think I used some similar tones to the bridge as well, just to tie in the local rock. Came along with some black washes, both acrylic washes that I made, as well as those oil washes from Tamiya, and they're looking very good. I'm definitely going to do a lot more work on these in the future, but that'll do for now to get the idea. I had a lot of trees left over from the previous layout, so I've come along and I've placed those in just using a screwdriver to make holes where each tree goes, and this allows me to get an idea of what the scene's going to look like. I then removed all those trees and replaced them with some markers that are numbered. This is a method that Luke Towan uses. It allows you to put ground cover underneath the trees and have some sort of shadier spots where there's less grass, where your trees are going to go, without getting your trees covered in scatter and static grass. For the ground cover itself then, I used the previously mentioned Geek Game Scenics items, as well as some soil that I'd previously sifted and baked, as well as some tile grout that I bought from Wix. You can see I've just covered this in some watered down PVA glue and then scattered on a mix of various ground cover scatters. Then came along with Warworld Scenic static grass and used some hairspray to layer it. I will be trying out some new techniques with static grass in the future using the Warworld Scenic's layering system and their layering glues, but for now hairspray will do fine. I can't tell you exactly what static grasses these are, as I did this a few weeks ago, but again, I'll cover this in future videos. It's now time to glue those trees back in place. You can see I've got some of the seafoam trees around what's going to be a little field here, and it's time to put in a larger tree that I'd made by hand a few years ago. So first I pierced a hole using a chisel, and then the tree was glued in, and later on I came back and put some scatter around the base. So here you can see the left hand side of the module is looking rather good, with some various static grasses and scatters, and then all the seafoam trees coming from the previous layout. Okay, so turning my attention to the other side of the layout, you can see there's a heck of a lot of trees here, as I've decided to make a little bit of a woodland, again stealing ideas from the previous rendition of the layout. So I came along, covered this in some glue and water mix, scattered with some tile grout, and then followed up with some darker soil scatters and various things from those Geek Gaming scatters that I bought. I've then wet it all to allow it to glue properly. And jumping ahead a little bit, I followed up with the same techniques, just using static grass, Wooden Scenic's foam scatters, and lots of hairspray. I've also filled in underneath the end of the viaduct there, using a lot of my old seafoam trees just mushed together. You can see where I've put some scatter over the top of the static grass just to try and make it look more shrub-like and more overgrown as it's coming down the side of the embankment here. The scene overall I think is looking quite good. There's still a lot of work to go. Here you can see we're back inside for the evening. This was the end of my final day, and you can see as well I've come back with the airbrush and just painted around the bottom of the viaduct a little bit. Got some paint down in the bottom of the river. I do have resin to go into this river, but I thought it was too risky to put it in the final hours I had at my parents' house, so I'm going to leave that for next time I visit. And here on the final morning, just before we drove off to return home, you can see the state of the module. You can see I've painted the river, just a dark colour there. Again, I'll be coming back to this. Now all of the scatters and glues have dried. I think it looks quite good. I'm going to leave you with a photo montage of the final scene as it currently stands. So I look forward to seeing you next time. I'm not sure when the video will be and what it will be on. But yeah, I'll see you then.